Today, I want to talk about the real reason that Love Quinn didn't appear in You Season 5, not even in so much as a hallucination or flashback. For real this time. The final season of You was focused on teeing up justice for Joe's victims and exploring the delusional fantasy that he creates to manipulate, and there's no room for love in that. Love Quinn was the queen of her own delusions, and she wasn't a victim of Joe in the same way as the others. She was warned of his violence and chose to take part in it. Introduced as a response to Candace's call for accountability, Joe looked to Love for salvation and she delivered, executing his impulses for him and killing Candace. Love casts herself as Joe's soulmate and attempts to play her part in Madre Linda, but she takes on the traits of the man she married, and in the end, she faces the same fate as the women before her when she wakes up to reality and no longer wants to play along. Her change of heart comes too late to count for anything, and Love is left in Season 3, reappearing to Joe in a dream during Season 4, and only being mentioned in his confession in Season 5, but that admission from Joe is significant. Love didn't appear in the final season because she didn't deserve to. Her purpose in the story has been served. No matter how pretty you think the actress is, her character was a crazy serial killer who hurt the people that Joe put in harm's way and independently abused her own brother and Theo. She wasn't manipulated into the madness, she was a willing participant who only woke up to the wrongness of her actions when the right woman came along to get through to her, because believing she killed Theo didn't. While Love was a victim in some ways, she was ready to take on Joe's darkness and do his dirty work for him when she connected the dots about his baggage with Beck after he presented himself as sensitive and remorseful. Joe lets Love lead him through letting Beck go, laundering his process through her as if she is saving him. It's just an act playing victim, but it resonates with Love and she believes Joe over Candace, not wanting to let go of their budding love story, and offers him acceptance in lieu of accountability. When she discovers Delilah in the cage, Love slays her to secure her own future with Joe, but once she reveals her shared truth to him, it shatters his perfectly imperfect perception of Love and he plots his escape. With Candace and her implications off of his case, Joe is ready to kill Love until she reveals that she's carrying his child. As Love accepted Joe's murder of unspecial and mediocre Beck and his abuse against his crazy ex Candace, even letting it slide when the violence becomes targeted at her, she spends Season 3 trapped in a cage of her own creation just like Joe. But unlike Joe, Love is trying to play her part to return them to the romance of their love story, while Joe is playing his part to cover for his extramarital affairs while looking for a way out. Love repeatedly tries to play by Joe's rules as previously established, killing Natalie when she discovers that Joe is obsessing over her, targeting the object of his attention instead of recognizing the underlying issue is Joe's behavior. Love perpetuates Joe's pattern of violence and takes on his tactics more and more throughout the season. Despite her participation, it doesn't afford her any loyalty or protection in the long run, and Joe doesn't recognize Love's efforts to steer them towards their previously shared dream of domestic bliss because he's already decided that he's done with her. Love plays his game and follows his lead, and even when Joe finds himself temporarily impressed by her, he reverts right back to disgust when she's finished serving her purpose. And Love is rewarded with betrayal for enabling him. She continues to lash out, calling over Marianne to kill her too, and only deciding to spare her after discovering that she's also a mother.
Oh wait, she's a mom now. I guess I can't slit her throat.
Love recognizes the identity they share and sends Marianne away, but her solidarity is conditional and she only extends empathy to the perfect victim of beautiful mother Marianne, while homewrecker Natalie was simply guilty and given no grace. After Love exposes the real Joe to Marianne, she readies to slash his throat, but he poisons her with her own paralytic. Because she was never special or any different from the others, and it was always going to leave here, no matter how much of herself that she gave to him. Her first season parallels Joe's pursuit of Candace, and Love's Season 2 is Season 3, which is Joe's Season 1, and it acts as a play on the dark face of Love, capital L, as she tries to pursue her perfect marriage story, ultimately ending in her untimely demise. But while Beck was an unwitting victim who rebuked Joe's violence and rejected his justifications for murder, Love was a willing accomplice, and she not only accepted Joe's abuse against women, but chose to participate. And for that, she suffers the inevitable fate of death at the hands of her husband. When somebody shows you who they are, maybe you should believe them.
I tried to kill her.
I blamed it all on her.
I told myself that I could be different, I could do it another way.
But that was a lie, like so many others.
From the second half of Season 2, Love acted as an extension of Joe and carried out the violence that he would have otherwise committed for himself once he figured out the right narrative framing. He found her when he was looking for some way to run from Candace's account of him, and discovering Love's own darkness allowed Joe to define his will as good and her kills as bad. Joe fixated on an idealized version of Love, unknowingly falling for somebody who was holding all of the darkness he hated in a vessel that he could admire while avoiding the endgame of facing himself. So it's fitting for the figment of Love to return and taunt Joe in a drug-induced dream when he's again contending with who he really is. Just as Reese's dismissive ranting about Marianne is a reveal of Joe's real feelings,
And for what? To save a junkie who shagged you while your wife and child waited at home? Remind me why the fuck you're giving up everything for some pathetic woman who hates you.
Love questioning Joe about his pattern and caging of Marianne is his own awareness projected externally internally.
So, is this a coincidence?
She was always his mirror, and he refused to see the truth of himself when she was alive, but silenced by death, Love returns in a dream to voice Joe's critical acknowledgement of his own behaviors. Love was the salve to soothe Joe's ego when Candace came back with abuser allegations. In an attempt to maintain his moral righteousness, Joe externalizes his guilt, first through Love and then through Reese. But once Joe finally accepts himself and embraces his violent desires he started running from in season 2, Love becomes irrelevant and Joe falls back into fantasy. The final season circles back to the first while continuing the story from the fourth and explores the delusional world that Joe creates and the character that he cultivates and how he uses that to exploit the emotions of his victims. Love doesn't return from the dead or haunt Joe like Beck because she was bad, and that doesn't make it okay to kill her, but Love as a character was a predator and a murderer and a hypocrite, and I didn't even get into any of the Theo stuff, and if she wasn't dead, then she would deserve to rot in jail. That doesn't mean that Love wasn't also a victim, but she was a villain, so she gets to sit out the season. Though me being me, I would argue that there is influence of Love in Louise's story, as they both set out to lead Joe through their own stories, challenge him as they define their own characters, hide their awareness as they perform for his gaze, and lean in to discover the real Joe, believing that they can offer him a special love and understanding. But Love became like Joe in ways that the others resisted. Beck refused to accept that he murdered her friends, Marianne called him out for killing Love and Ryan, Kate dug up everything she had buried and freed Nadia, and Louise learns the moral lessons that Joe never could. Love didn't return because she was the comforting narrative that Joe created to save himself from the reality of Candace confronting him with his violent nature. And Joe has moved on from that conflict, accepting murder as a tool and finding comfort instead in the fantasy that he creates to insulate his love in. The final season is for the victims and the viewers, for Louise to lead the audience through a mix of every story that has come before and challenge Joe's entire premise of playing out his fantasies in real life, concluding that it is in fact wrong to manipulate other people's lives. And in all of that exploration of agency, autonomy, and integrity, there's really no room to absolve an accomplice of the enemy. Sorry if that sounds harsh, but Joe admitted that he abused Candace and Love still chose to save him and kill her. Compare that to Kate, who put her life on the line and secured Joe's confession to Love's murder, an admission that not only ensures he'll face justice, but undermines his framing of Love as singularly crazy. She was a victim in that regard, but the real reason that Love didn't return in the sisterhood team-up season of You is because she's not a girl's girl. In the context of Joe's victims, she's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Sorry, but the crazy ex-murderer isn't invited to our women supporting women party, considering she killed 3 of them.